In an effort to make my squirrel videos look more cinematic, I decided to do some research on YouTube. In doing so, I've discovered a startling controversy. Many YouTubers don't agree on what cinematic means. I naively thought there were some rules established for cinematic footage. I thought everyone filmed in 24 frames per second and used a shutter speed of 1/50th, just like Tony Northrup said.
Filmmakers are usually shooting at 24 frames per second, and they want to use what we call a 180-degree shutter. That means that their shutter speed should be twice their frame rate. They want a shutter speed of 1/50th of a second. By basically keeping the shutter open for half of the frame rate, you end up with some amount of motion captured and some amount of jerkiness captured. This perfect compromise has been used in film since the beginning of time, and every movie that you saw as a kid, you watched it at 24 frames per second and 1/50th of a second, and that's kind of what film has come to mean to you.
But to my absolute surprise, some people actually crank their shutter when they're filming out in bright sunlight and they want to shoot with a wide open aperture and they don't have an ND filter around. Casey from Camera Conspiracies has been known to use 1/4000th when he's filming outdoors.
1/4000th of a shutter is not ideal, but it's still fine. You still get the magic, unless you wear glasses. So now I'm gonna switch to exposing properly with aperture. It's Toniature. 14 Tonys later, and here we are, properly exposing. But your autofocus doesn't work? Huh? Noticing? You cloud piece of puffy shit. Walking in a friendly motion blur, 1/50th, exposed nicely. Huh? And now we go to proper Toniature mode. You seeing it? You seeing the magic? There's no autofocus box on my face. You're supposed to be better in this mode. See? Doesn't matter as long as you move fairly slow. The cars don't jitter like you think they are.
Now, Vu from NVU Films made it really clear that you never want to crank your shutter if you want to be a professional.
With the continued degradation of quality in the video making space, one of the things people are starting to sacrifice the most is using an ND filter properly to maintain a 180-degree shutter rule in their footage. And if you're like me, you are a bokeh douchebag trash, which means you like to shoot wide open all the freaking time, just like I am right now, shooting on the Lumix S1 Mark II with the 7 Artisans 35mm f1.8 lens, and I am using an ND filter right now. And some people would rather just continue to shoot f1.8 and crank their shutter all the way. And the thing is, if you want to improve your overall imagery, if you want to stand out, if you want to make your footage look more like the footage you see in Hollywood films, in that stupid Netflix trash, you want to make sure you maintain 180-degree shutter rule so you have proper motion blur. Like I have right now, moving my hands, there should be a proper look, I don't know.
I might end up cranking my shutter sometimes because I really don't like ND filters very much. I usually buy the $30 ones and they make those ugly X patterns. And I also end up having an issue with the autofocus not working properly. I did ask Tony Northrup about this, and my suspicions were correct.
I was actually in the chat. She was talking here before, and she asked the question, can an ND filter affect autofocus?
Oh, yeah, totally. Because the ND filter is blocking light before it gets to the camera. So if you use a camera with an optical viewfinder like a DSLR and you put the ND filter on, suddenly you can't see anything. The camera also can't see anything. So sometimes what I have to do is I focus with the ND filter off. I switch it to manual focus and then I put the ND filter on if your camera doesn't work. If you have like a camera that has great low light autofocus, it might still work.
I don't think I'll mind sacrificing a little motion blur. In continuing my research, I thought I had discovered that footage is considered cinematic if it's captured at golden hour, just like Danny Gavert says.
Have you ever wondered why shooting at high noon or shooting with the sun directly in your town's face looks so bad? It's because it creates a flat world, and flat does not create 3 dimensions. Backlighting is one of the easiest ways to pull your subject from your scene and to create depth. It's amazing to me how many new shooters do not utilize this technique. It creates roll-offs from highlights to shadows in a repeating fashion. It makes objects seem to fade away into the distance. And you can achieve this by just going outside at golden hour and placing the sun behind and off frame from your subject.
I have to admit I was a little disheartened by this because I usually sleep in well past sunrise, and you really won't catch me out in the streets with people when it's sunset. But then I discovered from watching Casey from Camera Conspiracies that the true hour for filmmaking is noon.
This is so cinematic. High noon. This is when all the filmmakers come out to the park to make their movies. That's why all movies look like this. It's a good shot.
And then I thought I had really stumbled on the secret to cinematic squirrel footage: slow motion. Casey from Camera Conspiracies uses it all the time, and it looks so mysterious and magical.
I'm always shocked and perplexed when I get comments like, "Why do you need slow motion? You're the only one." Like, are you new to Earth? Things move at a normal speed that our eyes see, and then if you slow it down, everything is cooler. Every single thing, like the magic, can only be had in slow motion. It's one of the only things that I produce that actually gives me chills and gives me just this sense of purpose when I capture some kind of moment and it's super slow, and then I make music and put it to it and somehow it fits together, and I'm just like, wow, that's the best, man. Why aren't I doing this all day long?
And then I found out from watching Mark Bone that it's possible to overuse slow motion footage.
Well, too much slow motion makes your film slow and makes everything overdramatic when it doesn't need to be.
I don't know. I don't really think there's such a thing as too much slow motion. Not for squirrel cinema. The one thing I thought everyone would agree on when it comes to cinematic footage is that it must be filmed in log and color graded.
Filmmakers need to be able to shoot these very high contrast scenes where they want to capture all of the details in a very bright sky, but still capture a fairly dark subject in the foreground, for example, somebody in a car. Video will typically convey 8 or 9 stops of dynamic range, but you might need 12, 13, 14 stops of dynamic range to film a scene like that and capture both the deep shadows and the bright highlights. Lots of video cameras have a reasonable solution for this. Something like Vlog or S-Log, where the entire scene is filmed very low contrast, and then in post-processing you expand that contrast.
Vu from NVU Films always shoots in log to get the most dynamic range. He's a professional.
I'm shooting in log, unlike you low-grade pieces of trash that are shooting in standard picture profile at like ISO 100. Basically, if you don't want to be a piece of trash, you got to be shooting in log. You know, none of this cinetone, none of this cine-like, none of this I'm a piece of trash D-bag videographer picture profile.
But then I discovered that Tony Northrup uses a standard picture profile.
We also used that for a long time making our YouTube videos, but we found it to be an absolute pain. And we actually found that it produced a great more noise in our videos and generally made everything look worse. As a YouTuber, if the sky behind your head is blown out, like literally nobody ever cares. They don't care.
I do enjoy using S-Log 3 on my Sony a7S III, but trying to get my footage to look less green has been a real challenge. The one thing I thought I knew about cinematic footage is that it requires a shallow depth of field so that you could blur out the background and focus in on the character for storytelling purposes, just like Alex Zarfati says.
When people think of the cinematic look, they often visualize an image with a very shallow depth of field. And basically what a shallow depth of field does is that it creates a very small zone of focus. So it will isolate your subject and blur everything in the foreground or the background out. If you guys take a look at some of these images right here, what really makes them pop is how in focus and sharp the subject is, while you get this really nice, beautiful bokeh in the background. Here's a very important storytelling tool when you decide to use shallow depth of field. This technique, a lot of the times in film, can be used to emphasize a character's emotions and really pull the audience into that intimate moment that they're having on screen.
But watching Casey from Camera Conspiracies, I realized that you might want to stop down a little bit.
We're in Paris, and I spent $70,000 to get here, and it's a once-in-a-lifetime shot. Oh no, my footage, it's all blurry. What happened? A YouTuber said it would be cinematic. I lost everything. Thankfully, it was the friends that we made along the way that was the most important. I made no friends.
In doing my research on cinematic footage, I've come to the conclusion that nobody can agree on the rules. Some people use a 180-degree shutter rule, and some people crank their shutter. Some people use nothing but slow motion, and others use it sparingly. Some color grade, and others use standard picture profiles. Some shoot everything wide open, and others dare to stop down. Even if we don't all agree on what makes footage cinematic, I know we can agree that we should be using that footage to keep telling incredible stories. If you like this video, give it a like, consider subscribing for more camera-related content from a newbie like me. God bless.